Easier said than done.
Sit down.
I got 2 girls.
One sec. Let me think of something.
No, that's all right.
We have something wrong with
Well, you can see the 8 and the O.
No, I know, but in other words, they're going to take a picture. Hey, Mike. From the top.
Oh, that's good.
There it is.
Up and see if you can follow straight him out.
Make them even.
That's good enough. Oh.
You gotta get.
Oh, wait.
That's disgusting. Stop.
Anymore.
There's no anniversary song we never want to sing. Happy anniversary.
To you.
Newark store clerk.
It's Tom's Sports Store.
She told me the other.
That was Tom's Sports Store.
Sorry.
That knew the competitor was.
He's like, nobody's seen Frank Gabriel sing. So luckily for us, despite my father's crude pickup lines and fear of commitment, the relationship grew, and in 1963, my father made an honest woman out of his 20-year-old child bride. This union would bring 5 children to the Coletta home. In raising this many kids, most normal adults would ultimately snap or find a hobby such as smoking crack cocaine to numb the pain of a family of 7. But not my mother. She's managed to live 80 years without ever saying a curse word. My mother stubs her toe, exposing bone. Darn it! Drops a pickle jar, sending shards of glass and brine 30 feet in all directions. For crying out loud! Luckily, Adrian inherited the same sense of calm and coolness under stressful situations. For anyone who feels bad for us and thinks we were sheltered from expletives growing up, fear not, we saw Aunt Ro often and we learned all of the bad words. Bob, you made raising 5 kids look easy. You made raising 5 kids look easy. While we may not have gone on lavish vacations, had flashy cars, or had name brand snacks in the house, we always had love and freshly made chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah.
Those cookies were a staple on the kitchen counter and they reached legendary status in the neighborhood. I now know that you likely baked these so Alex would have friends growing up. I did not realize he was here. These little parenting touches are what made you so special. There was another parenting hack that you specialized. You had 5 kids, and yet you effortlessly pretended that I was not your favorite for almost 47 years. You deserve an award for this performance. Don't worry, I never told the others. Your artistic skills and ability to create something out of nothing is like nothing I've ever seen. From your repurposed furniture to your clothing made from various material scraps, to whipping up a 7-course meal using whatever's in the house, you never cease to amaze me. I remember calling you with help on a Halloween costume, sometime in the late 90s. I was dressing up as a priest. More specifically, it was a pedophile priest. You hated the idea, and you said you wouldn't help me. But within 10 minutes, you not only called me back, but you told me that you had a plush doll that I could use as a bent-over child, attached to the costume. This was the moment I knew I found the right mother. You don't see too many pedophile jokes at an 80-year-old birthday party. All right, but I did it. I'm done with that. Mom, you've created a life of love and happiness for your family. Your standing Sunday dinner party is the highlight of my week. It's a tradition that most families can only wish for, and you make it possible. Even though I may tell you don't make enough food, I've never left hungry. So thank you for helping me carry an extra 15 to 20 pounds on my belly through my 40s. Mom, you've been an amazing role model and resource for your children and grandchildren. You would literally do anything for any one of us, except attend a youth sporting event. And that is the truth. State championships, whatever it was, no, I'm not coming. Thank you for being the person you are, and here's to 80 more. However, in addition to my mother's 80th, let's not forget it's also my mother and father's 60th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
So this remarkable feat is something to be celebrated. I asked my father what the secret was to this relationship longevity. He said it's 100% psychological. She's psycho and he's logical. Please everybody raise a glass to mom and dad. Yay. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Thank you, Joe.
That was great. What a nice surprise.
Thank you all for coming out to the celebration of someone that we could all agree is the epitome of calm, cool, and collected. Except when the topic of the president comes up. Now, 10 years ago for my father's 70th birthday, we all got together, I stood up here, I lightly roasted him. Unfortunately, I used most of my best material during that, so I'm going to keep this much simpler. So, my father was born in 1940 to Italian immigrant parents. My grandparents came to this country separately in hopes of a better life in America. They landed in New York City, and they each began a life in the New World. According to Ellis Island passenger manifest records, Margaret and Enrico Coletta, different last name from my grandmother, came here with a combined $67, a jar of homemade gravy, and 3 sticks of pepperoni. According to legend, my grandmother and grandfather met on the internet, fell in love, got married, and a few years later gave birth to our guest of honor. Anyone who knows my father knows his classic stories. Somehow they never seem to get old. I like to call this one, How I Met Your Mother. As the story goes, my parents met in the late 1950s.
That's what I was going to talk about, but okay, go on.
Too bad. You should have went first. The setting was Newark, New Jersey. I feel like this should be like a Jersey Boys style narration with like the music for it. But the scene begins in Coletta's grocery store, where the Coletta boys are showing off as usual, when a young, pretty Barringer student came in. My mother insisted I added pretty to that. Joe and Anthony were throwing toilet paper rolls to each other, quarterback, wide receiver style, in order to stock the shelves. Apparently in the 50s, showing off with toilet paper was something that made women swoon. I heard swoon was like a big word in the 50s. That's what it's called. Yeah. Perhaps by pure coincidence, having a healthy supply of toilet paper once again became a status symbol 80 years later. There was immediate connection between Joe and Sandy, but it took many visits back to the store to make Joe finally act. Sandy would look for excuses to visit the store. By some accounts, she even came in wearing a disguise. However, this is unsubstantiated. So in reality, what happened was, my father saw my mother out on a date, he couldn't handle the sight, and he finally asked her out. And that love connection has produced 4 children, the adoption of Tony, and 12 grandchildren. Speaking of the grocery store, the next one's a great story for you kids who think you have it tough. One day, like a typical teenager, my father chose to play baseball instead of fulfilling his duties at the family business. My grandfather was having none of it, and not only came to the field to recover his son, but he did so wearing a bloody apron and carrying a meat cleaver. I'm 99% sure this outfit was done for effect, but this was apparently a normal occurrence in Newark at this time, because nobody said a word about the psychotic Italian gentleman with a deadly weapon on the loose grabbing a kid off of a baseball field. If this happened today, Enrico would have been tasered, arrested, and the Coletta Boys Therapy Session memoirs would have been a bestseller on Amazon. You can appreciate that, Uncle Ann.
Yeah.
80 years hasn't come without bumps and bruises, though. My father has overcome carotid artery surgery more than 20 years ago. Just over the past few years, he's additionally suffered through foot surgery, major back surgery, and being a fan of the New York Giants. The back surgery was a tough one. What was described as being a few days recovery turned into a few months of intense rehab just to regain his ability to walk. Eternally resourceful and always looking to make the best of every situation, my mother even started upholstering a wheelchair that she found in someone's garbage in anticipation of my father never walking again. Thank God he's upright again and getting around as well as can be expected. But without saying anything at the time, I was most worried about being asked to help to build a ramp outside of his house. But most recently, as you know, coronavirus hit my parents' house. Our biggest fears came true. We all felt it. While my mother bared the brunt of the sickness, my father was under the weather for a few days. It was scary for obvious reasons, mostly because none of us knew if we were ever going to have a quality Sunday dinner fully prepared for us again. But as my mother continued feeling sick, my father started to recover. He was forced to do things he's never had to do in 57 years of marriage. Make himself a cup of coffee, boil water, figure out how to get the toilet paper on that hole. Things most people master early on if they're not married to my mother. But he did it. We knew we had it in him, and it seems odd how proud we were of a guy that spent 44 years in education, that he was able to accomplish what most of us learn in 7th grade home ec class. But speaking of home ec, one last story. We probably have all heard it, but times like today, this story would have been so insane that we probably would be having this party next to my parents' trailer down by the river, because my father would have been fired during this. But I'll give you the short version. A student in my father's school bakes a cake in class for his sister's birthday. As he left the school, a bully, there were bullies back then, knocks the cake out of the kid's hands, destroying the cake. So being near the scene, my father, came over to the distraught student, saw what was going on, and went over to investigate. Of course, you probably know these kids' names, even though I don't.
Billy Reddington.
There you go, Billy Reddington. Once he confirmed what happened, and after determining the cake was unsavable, he had the bully pick the cake up off the ground. And he did what teachers have dreams of doing to those select few, as my father would say, miserables. He smashed the cake right into the bully's face. I love this story for 3 reasons. A, he stuck up for the underdog. B, it took real balls as a teacher to smash that cake in the kid's face. And C, it's the only instance in recorded history of my father ever wasting food. My father not only taught history for many years, but he's lived through so much of it that he's a walking, talking history book. If you've ever talked to him, you've no doubt heard a detailed explanation of the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Newark riots, or a full explanation of a movie he last saw in 1964. He also notoriously asks me if I remember things or people from at least 20 years before I was born. So a normal conversation would be, Joe, you remember the Donna Reed show, right? Dad, I was born in 76. I remember from Magnum PI to now. But that's the majority of our dialogue. And then also, there's
all reruns now.
I never saw them. But there's also the inevitable political discussion when I go over there. So as most of you know, we shifted his focus from sports and sitcoms to the seedy underbelly of television, cable news. Growing up, he knew every player on every professional sports team. Now he knows every single political player in the U.S. He knows senators, correspondents, wives of foreign leaders. His feverish passion that he demonstrates for the current political climate in America hasn't been seen since he was a young Yankees fan in the 1950s. Speaking of that, you all saw the cards right here. The limited edition Joe Coletta baseball card. It's actually styled after a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. That's the holy grail of baseball cards. So this is a card that we used to go to baseball card shows when I was a kid. We would talk about it back then. We still talk about the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle to this day. So I thought this card had meaning. I thought it was a perfect way to celebrate your 80th birthday on paper or cardboard. I hope you like them.
Loved it.
But I don't want to hold this up any longer. Dad, you're insanely loved by so many. I constantly have people tell me how much they adore when I post something about you and Mom on social media. Even those that don't know you, they can't get enough of you guys. So 10 years ago, I stood up here at his 70th birthday. I said, anyone who knows my father loves my father, which is still the same today, except those driving behind him on a one-lane highway, or the thousands of players that have played in the game that you've umpired. Although he is officially retired from umpiring. I don't know if he announced that, but that's the fact right there. So everyone in his family is so lucky to have you as a father, a grandfather, brother, or uncle. As I mentioned before, your signature cool, calm, and collected approach to everything is so refreshing in a world that's become a million miles an hour. We love you more than... Cut.
Is there emotion?
That's it.
Is there emotion?
I love you, man.
Thank you. That was great. That was great.
I want to move around on Sunday.
Sal has something to say.
Here's the end.
Getting on his attention.
But we want to go walk on the boardwalk. We'll just go right into that rest area.
Sit down right there. Why are you coming up with first guys? Let's do this.
What's interesting about our perspective as grandchildren is that we only know the Joe Coletta of the past 25 years. So as we call him, Grandpa. So our grandfather is a man who has instilled simple principles. Treat everyone with respect, don't be a jerk, but above all else, relax. So he's a man that can relate any teachable moment to a historic event. So at 7 years old, I may have not understand how my youth football flag game comeback was relatable to the Allies invading Normandy in 1944. Each of those lessons and stories are priceless. So, and a large reason why at 24 years old, I still love going back to Grandma and Grandpa's house to sit down in the living room is because of all those priceless memories and stories that continue to this day. But it's not just through Grandpa's words and encyclopedia-like memory that makes him so special, it's his actions. So whether it's attending our sports games or graduations, confirmations, or communions, a quick look to the stands, or in some cases the pew, almost always proved to show Grandpa there and showing his unwavering support. But even the little things, like staying up late with us to watch Yankees play on the West Coast, helping us to create our first PowerPoint presentation when it was brand new on the computer, or even showing us the compost out back and trying to explain why in God's name he was taking an orange peel out of my hands and putting it in the bin outside. While these actions may seem simple, each is a memory we'll always cherish, and you are a man that I will always strive to emulate when I'm a father and eventually a grandfather. When I look around this room full of people here to celebrate you, it's easy to forget that without you, it wouldn't be a matter of us not being the people that we are. We simply wouldn't be here today. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being the man that you are, and we love you. Salud.
Grazie. Joey, good job. Great. How can I follow this up?
You don't have to. It's very simple.
Oh boy.
Thank you all. It was great. I love you all. Again, you all wouldn't be here if it wasn't for us.
Love you, Grandpa.
We love you, Grandpa.
Woo! Thanks again for everything.
Salud.